Today is March the 29th, 2021. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program in the library. And with me today is Phil Wright, a 1977 graduate of Oklahoma State University, where he received a degree in civil engineering. So thank you for taking time to be with us today. This interview will be part of our O State Stories Oral History collection. And while a student at OSU, Phil was the president of the Residence Halls Association and was instrumental in fundraising drives to repair the iconic fountain that graces the south entrance of the Edmund Lowe Library here on campus. But before we get to that part, let's learn a little bit about you. Start wherever you like.
Very good. Well, it's good to be with you. And I was actually born in Evansville, Indiana. We moved to Oklahoma when I was a small boy, Oklahoma City. I went to Northwest Classen High School and was at that time kind of a modest athlete. I wasn't very good. Wrestling was my sport of choice, and I couldn't quite make the graduation from 6 minutes to 9 minutes to even try out at Oklahoma State if I'd have even had a mind to. So I started into civil engineering school right out of high school and went to the College of Engineering, got my degree in the summer actually of 77. And before I graduated, I had already accepted full-time employment with Conoco back in the summer of 76. I got an internship with them in Ponca City and enjoyed a very robust and successful, by many measures, career in spite of myself at Conoco. I was with them for 13 years. And then in 1989, I went to work for the Williams companies in Tulsa. And I spent the balance of my career there. I'm sorry, did you have a question for me?
No, go ahead. You're good.
I began at Williams as vice president of marketing and transportation for the pipeline company and held various positions over the years. Probably the biggest job I had there was as the CEO and president of the Williams Energy Services Company, which was at that time a $14 billion enterprise with 7,000 people across the globe, as far away as Lithuania and down into Venezuela and up into Alaska. So it was quite a very interesting enterprise. And then when Enron blew up and Williams went into a bit of a liquidity crisis in 2002, I began the process of, as chief restructuring officer, selling a lot of the businesses that I'd worked quite a bit of my career to put into the Williams portfolio. But it was good because we were able to survive that. People who are listening that might have owned Williams stock during that period around 2002 remember that it went from I think we had a high of about $53 a share down to like 98 cents. And that was kind of breathtaking, but we dug it out. The company did not have to file bankruptcy, thankfully. God is good. And we actually recovered. And I think the peak after that was about $64 a share. So, and that was after we had split off the exploration production company. So, in any way, I'm kind of digressing, but in 2012, April 1st, I decided to retire from corporate life and took a position on the board of Piedmont Natural Gas Company over in Charlotte and Aegeon Corporation out of St. Louis. And both of those companies have subsequently merged with others. And I am now, for the first time in over 42 years, not a part of a publicly traded company. My wife and I have moved on to Chapter 2, and we are now doing intensive work with marriages, couples in crisis. And we're not affiliated.
What a change.
Yeah, it's quite a change, isn't it? Our education in that area came primarily from our own experiences. We will have been married 42 years in December. So we we have our share of trials and tribulations that we learn from. We would just want to share that with other people.
Okay. Well, then let's back up. High school days. You went to North Clawson. Did you have a favorite teacher or a class?
Oh my goodness! I actually did. It was one of those gating events for me because I really wanted to get out of college with a degree that would get me a job, and I buckled down following kind of the turning point for me was in drafting. My instructor was named Fred Holloway, and he was tough on me. I was kind of yeah, I'd just go ahead and say rebellious, but he was a former military policeman, and so was quite able and a wrestler and a very good one when he was in school. But he was also the wrestling coach, and so he challenged me very publicly to go out for wrestling after a slight altercation I'd had with a peer in his class. And he said, if you think you're such a tough guy, come on out. And it shook me up, and it was a pivot point for me. And I wish he were here to thank him for that.
So, growing up, did you have siblings?
I did. I had an older brother who also went to Northwest Class. And in fact, he was valedictorian there. He had all the brains in our family, and he is now deceased.
I was thinking he might have been the one you first wrestled with.
Oh, no question about that. I was
Well,
4 years younger, and so he took full advantage of that.
so how did you come to choose OSU?
Well, in complete transparency, my girlfriend at the time was bound to go there no matter what. And more importantly, it was as much engineering school as I could afford. It was I had been accepted into Lehigh and Washington U in St. Louis, but I couldn't afford either one of those schools. And so I knew I was going to have to work while going to school. I did that. I painted houses and did maintenance work for a woman who owned lots of rental property all over Oklahoma City. And I would go down on weekends and work for her and clean up apartments and do odd jobs. And that's how I earned the currency to get through school substantially.
So had your parents gone to college?
No, neither of my folks. My dad hadn't graduated high school even, and so he was just we were of very modest means.
So first generation, but they were encouraging.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
Were they ever? They made great sacrifices to help me as they were able, but again, they were very encouraging. Sure.
So where did you live when you moved to campus?
Great question. I was a committed. I don't want to use the term that people called us back then, but I was in Kerr Hall all of my stay at Oklahoma State, and lived on Kerr 5.
Okay. All 4 years?
Yep, sure
all
did.
4 years.
Absolutely. And that was part of the thing that got me intrigued with RHA. It was kind of also a pivot point, one of those gating events, because there was a meeting when we first got there. Of course, freshmen, we knew very little about any opportunities that might be out there for us. But our student assistant on Kerr 5 held a powwow, kind of a meeting in our lounge, and said, we need to have a president of this dorm floor. So was anybody interested? And a couple of us raised our hands, said, sure, we'll give that a go. And we had a little brief election there, and I got elected to that, much to my surprise. I got involved in the RHA government that first year and thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. This is something that I like. I like the notion of being able to live in an independent residence and have a lot going in the way of social activities and cultural activities. I can't remember what we called the award the next year, but we won a campus-wide competition for the best residence halls floor. And we had done things like a haunted house down on, I can't remember what street it was on, but an old abandoned house. Somebody got the ends to let us set up for Halloween. We set up this haunted house down there and raised funds for couple of things. First of all, that Ray Murphy was an injured wrestler there, and there was a foundation that was kind of contributing to his care, and so we wanted to make a major contribution of that. And we also wanted a foosball table on our floor, so we used the proceeds of that to do that. And we did lots of little things like that to kind of boost engagement and for folk who couldn't perhaps afford to get into the Greek system and or didn't care to. We had an opportunity for them there. That's one of the main things I liked about RHA. So then, like the following year, I screwed up my courage and ran for president of Kerr. And we got a little organized and for once in my life, and won that office. And wow, that really surprised me. And served for that year as president of Kerr, and then having gotten a deeper level involvement in RHA, I threw my hat in the ring to run for RHA president. The next
Did you have a slogan? What your slogan?
I actually did. As a matter of fact, now that you mention it, I had a little orange and black. I engineered this orange and black campaign flyer that I put my picture on. I could probably find one of those somewhere if I dug hard enough, but I had my ugly mug on the front of it, and it said, "Vote Wright, R-I-G-H-T, vote Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T," and then I had little check marks by it. But that was the slogan: "Vote Wright, vote Wright," and had that kind of talked the girls into at Drummond into putting the letters in their windows facing the parking lot, and so it was out there kind of a building / billboard for my campaign.
Did not spur you to go into politics, though, did it?
No, heavens no. After some of the things that happened and the old collie kind of took us to task, I didn't want any part of it. We had a really unfortunate situation there. One of the people in our administration was familiar with a talent agent, and he arranged for a band to come to campus. He was friendly with this agent apparently, and they got Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen arranged to come to campus, but they needed to have a sponsor, an organized, sanctioned group to sponsor them to have the Saratine Center available to them. And so they brought that before the RHA, and we said, well, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. But we were just, how old? 20s, 19, 20, 22 probably at the outside. And we didn't know anything about contracting and didn't have the good sense to get legal help to scrub that down. Turns out they sold tickets and then didn't show up. And we were devastated. We didn't know what to do. I talked to our administrative sponsor out of the vice president of student affairs office. And I think the guy at that time was Norman. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he referred us to a lawyer in the university system, and that guy said, "You don't stand a prayer of collecting a dime on this." And so we had to just tell people, "I'm sorry." And boy, did we get lambasted for that, and probably rightly so. But I didn't want anything to do with politics after that.
Lesson learned, huh?
Yeah, Yeah.
And so I was reading just a little bit about the Men of 10.
Oh yeah, they were a great RHA floor. The Men of 10 had T-shirts. You know, of course, we all had T-shirts of some kind each year. You'd find an artist on your floor and get them to design up something. But the Men of 10 were actually a really great group of guys that did a lot of stuff. They just had a lot of fun and a lot of projects that they did for the school, and it's a good bunch of guys. I remember the student assistant was a guy named Ralph Glazner, and a little known fact that he liked to keep secret was that he was quite a good dancer and
Mhm.
had actually done Roman calisthenics to get in flexible shape to be a great dancer. But he was their student assistant, and he was kind of at the point of a lot of that good stuff that happened with the Men at 10.
Okay. And then I was reading that you were a member of the National Residence Hall's honorary whatever society, whatever, for
Mm-hmm.
making good grades.
No, it wasn't for making good grades. I think it had more to do with some of the things that we organized
Your
and when
service.
turned out really well at RHA. And again, I shouldn't have, if I even had the mind to at that time, I should have given somebody else the credit for that because I had a great supporting cast that served alongside me. One in particular standout was Ann Stuver, and she was vice president of women, and
Mm.
boy was she sharp. And her boyfriend at the time became her husband, a guy named Earl Graff. They were just fantastic, energetic, smart, and very very engaged. And they should have gotten a lot of the credit that I probably got.
Well, I was looking through the yearbook just really quickly, and I came
Mm-hmm.
across a picture of you in the maybe it was the Civil Engineering Society, some engineering club,
Mm.
three-piece suit and bow tie.
Yes, I was not. I was not rocking the sartorial splendor, but I've probably found that on sale. As I recall, that was a green corduroy suit uh, with a matching bow tie, and I wore it to virtually everything. I've had the good sense, though, finally, when it came interview time, to buy I read a book called Dress for Success, and that was not found in that book. So I got a decent suit for my job interviews, but I wore that thing to every event, whether it was Christmas time or not. It was particularly good at Christmas time because I could put a red tie on and look great, look very festive.
I was noticing quite a few of the guys would have handlebar mustaches.
Well, I had one.
Those were in style then too.
Well, there was a baseball pitcher named Raleigh Fingers, and I fashioned my mustache after him. And I did one of the I actually used wax on it back then. I had to quit doing it because if I wanted to kiss a girl, it would leave this brown stuff on her face. So I stopped that.
And about that time, streaking was popular.
Oh my goodness, terrible. Yes, it was. And at finals week, when they got that over with, after finals week was over, it was a particularly festive time around there. People were running around in the buff, and they get a tank full down there on the strip and do all kinds of crazy things. The most ridiculous of which was at one time there was a sirloin stockade down on Washington Street, and they had this big humongous bull on a trailer that was chained to the neon or the sign out in front of the stockade, and there were literally hundreds of students lined up along Washington Street there. And somebody got the bright idea that that bull needed to go into Theta Pond, and somebody came up with a set of bolt cutters and freed that trailer from the sign, and I would guess maybe 5 or 6 naked people got up on top of this bull, and they're pushing this thing down the street. They got to Theta Pond and they couldn't get it over the curb, so they backed it up and got a running start, and bam, that thing hit the curve, and all these naked people went flying off into Theta Pond into about 4 feet of accumulation of whatever's at the bottom of Theta. So newspaper flash. I think, in fact, that may have made it to the front page of the Daily Oklahoman.
Well, the 70s were interesting times to be
Not
here.
our best moment.
So other things going on in the 70s, you would have gotten here. Well, the Vietnam War was already over, or
Actually, not
why
quite.
then?
When I first started school, I had a student deferment, but then right before Nixon abolished the draft, I got a change in my status. And I thought it was a mistake, and I was really prepared to go down to the draft board and have an argument. But thankfully, Nixon abolished the draft, and I didn't have to sign up. But some of my friends actually got drafted.
Well, how was the environment on campus regarding that? Anything stick out?
No, I think Oklahoma State was pretty chill about that whole. I don't know that it was politically polarized much while I was there. I think all of that, to the extent there was any tension, would have preceded us in our class. Probably in the in the late 60s, 69, 70, all the way up to say 72, 73.
Okay. And you mentioned Nixon. He came to campus.
Not while I was there.
Okay. I was thinking he was the speaker at commencement.
No, not for ours.
Okay.
It may have been, but I since I graduated in the summer, I would have missed the main event. I was working when that was going on.
Were there very many women in your engineering classes?
No is the direct answer. There were a couple, and they were very bright. And in fact, I think there was a little bit of undercurrent because they often set the curve in some classes that were curved. But I wish I'd been smart enough to make friends with them. They might have helped me out a little bit. But yeah, they were very bright, and I lost track of them. But I would assume they were very successful people because they were very determined and quite engaged in serious business about getting their degrees.
Any female professors in engineering that you recall?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
No, I had female professors, but they were in like humanities and speech and such as that. Yeah, my history professor was a man, but not in engineering. No, not at that time.
Did any of your classes about eat your lunch?
Oh my goodness, yes. Calculus was a killer for me. It was, it was a struggle because I came within a fraction of changing colleges after calculus because it was killing me. And I finally I squeaked through that, and the balance of my when I got into the engineering science classes, I actually started to really enjoy what I was doing because I could see the sense in why I needed to know some of this stuff. Calculus just was hard. Modern physics I resented because it was, we were into stuff like quantum mechanics and that sort of thing. And I just thought, what the heck am I going to, I need a job. I'm not going to be using this in my job. So Dr. Bill Sibley, who was a wonderful head of that department at physics, tried to persuade me that I was being a bit myopic, which I was. And I should have listened to him because, I could have benefited a lot from being a bit more engaged. But modern physics was tough to get by.
So how did you get interested in civil engineering?
Great
in
question.
particular?
My father was in the construction business. He
Mhm.
started his own construction business, so I've been around construction all of my life, and I liked thinking about being one of the people who was able to articulate a plan and put construction shoe leather under it, so to speak.
I don't know. I don't know a great deal about it. I just think of people always refer to bridges when you talk about civil engineering. They do more than just build bridges, though.
Yeah, very much so. It was kind of an interesting thing because one of the job opportunities I had out of uh, getting that degree was to go to work for the U.S. Indian Health Service up in Alaska, building water treatment and sewer treatment facilities for the indigenous people up there. And it sounded really intriguing because, wow, I'd never been to that part of the world, and it would have been a great adventure as a single person going up there. But Conoco offered me $400 a month more, and that took all the brains out of that decision. So uh, I became a part of their pipeline department actually, and that was very helpful to have a civil engineering degree to go into that work. A lot of construction involved, but also a lot of hydraulics, and it was very critical. I think in retrospect, though, that my mother always kind of wished that I'd had my name on a plaque on a bridge somewhere. I was a bit disappointed, even when I'd kind of gotten into the executive ranks, but she got over it.
Well, I would think with that degree too, it would come in handy for homecoming decorations. When did did the dorm do much for that for homecoming?
We did, but you know what? There wasn't a lot of structural engineering involved in that, but
Um,
there was a whole lot of labor, as you probably know, pumping those chicken wire
yeah.
uh, uh, shapes, and you had to have somebody that had some right brain going on there, because those of us who were kind of left brainers were just all about the size and the dimensions and whatnot. I may have those reversed, but you needed artists, and they did an amazing job. You'd always find somebody that could really craft some beautiful floats, and then it was just down to sticking those little tissues in there with wallpaper paste on them and poking for hours. But that was kind of a neat social time where you could sit around and visit with people and whatnot.
Yeah, homecoming has just gotten bigger and bigger, I
Oh,
think.
as
When was the last time you were on campus?
I was back visiting my friend Randy Seitzinger, who had an art show. He's now moved quite up the ranks in the College of Engineering and Architecture. Is actually the head of it now, um, and I saw all the really cool things that are going on over there in CEAT, and wow, it has just become so state of the art in so many ways. And I love the fact that Oklahoma State has really leaned into some of the niches that are kind of centers of excellence for the Cowboys. We've got and a lot of that I think has Dr. Reed's fingerprints on it, because they got into one of the leading spaces in what is known as web technology, which most people wouldn't know much about, but people like Kimberly Clark darn sure would, because it's management of enormous volumes of things like rolls of paper and that sort of thing, and how to machine that well and efficiently and effectively, and way beyond that. I couldn't begin to do it justice in this conversation. But Oklahoma State is a center of excellence around that, and I think there's some surprising areas where the College of Engineering and Architecture has really leaned in and formed some. I don't want to pigeonhole the program into just niches, but they've got some excellent niches, and they've got some excellent basic engineering curriculum and graduate programming.
So you keep up with us a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Uh,
Well, you'll have to.
always watching the athletics. and staying tuned there. In fact, the last time my peers, we call ourselves the Cur 5B. We were not the A team; we were the B team. The Cur 5B boys went back there was for the a football game with TCU, and we won. But that's been quite a number of years, and it was quite a celebration, though. Those men were way smarter than me, and all ended up in really wonderful different careers. But it was good to be there for that.
You got five years to plan your 50th.
Yep.
With those guys.
That's thank you for pointing that out. That dates me a bit, doesn't it? But yeah, we need to get on that.
Yeah, I come at homecoming and see all when they do the walk around and all it's just very nice. It's very nice. Grown a lot. So let's get into the library. While you were a student, you were a student here, did you use the library any for studying or?
I actually did. I tended back then to have ADD, and to cope, any little noise would just wreck me, and there was always some noise, on a floor in a residence hall. Mm-hmm. And so I would go all the way to the top floor, where it was very, very quiet, and study there. So it was a place to kind of my sanctuary, and I loved the library.
Yeah, 5th floor is government documents. It's quiet. Yes.
Not a lot of folk coming up there.
Well, then, how did you get involved with? Well, let's back up. What was the fountain working when you first got here? Let's talk a little bit about that.
It might have been working my freshman year, but I think by the sophomore year, it was starting to have issues and problems and cracks and whatnot, and tiles were coming off, and it really looked pretty trashy. And then some genius got the idea that it was a good idea to build a bonfire up in the bowl when they had it shut off, and it cracked the bowl, as I recall. And I can't remember who in our administration at RHA came up with the idea, but it began to build a little bit of momentum, and it's like, hey, this is iconic. This is something that would be a shame to go to waste, and I think there was an appeal to the can't remember what it was called, the building services maintenance kind of part of the plant facility maintenance at Oklahoma State, and they just didn't have the budget for it, and so it was neglected, and I think. I don't remember all of the financial details behind, what order of magnitude the project was, but we got fairly visible and got a lot of support among RHA students to get involved in raising money for the refurbishment of that. And I think it got enough notoriety that other campus organizations came alongside and joined in. And when the administration the university administration saw the student effort in behind it, they put some additional muscle and got the job done.
Okay. Well, so the bonfire happened while you were a student here?
It must have, because I saw the bowl, as I recall, flowing water when I first got there, but it was after that, and I know it was and I don't know exactly the particulars on the bonfire, but I do know that something occurred up in there that really damaged it. They needed to.
So that would have been in the early 70s when that whatever happened.
Whatever happened because it damaged it, and they had somewhere along the lines, I don't know whether it was year 2 or year 3 for me, they shut the water off completely, and then it was just a ugly, tile chipped kind of place. It was not doing its job.
Well, what were some of the activities that you did to do for fundraising? Do you remember?
Great question. I wish I remembered all of them, because they were myriad. I honestly can't recall.
I had read something about a phone bank, doing a lot of
Yeah,
phone
there were
calling.
people dialing for dollars that just were calling folk and asking if they'd chip in. I do remember that, but apart from that, I don't remember what
and
else.
and that and that was before cell phones, and
Right. Yeah, but
it
it
was
was
just
literally dialing for dollars or
yeah.
punching buttons.
And in the dorms, you just had one or two hall phones on a floor
Some did. We had a phone
in your room.
in rooms in Kerr and Drummond and Willem and Parker and some of the newer, which are now torn down. Some of the newer residence halls had phone service, phone
Yeah,
jacks.
yeah. I know some in my day we just had one on. There was one on each end of the hall, and that was it.
Yeah, yeah.
In my dorm, and I had read that it was going to cost something like, I don't know, $20,000 to do the repairs,
It was
and
at
that was just
least
a lot of money.
it was at least that. It may have, yeah. That's probably right. Your data's a lot fresher than my feeble neurons are, but yeah, it was a big number. It was overwhelming for a budget that was pretty tight.
Yeah, and you had to have an architect involved and physical plan and all of these other parts. I don't know, was anyone from the library involved in that?
I'm
Do you
sure they
recall?
were. I'm sure there was coordination there, but that was a project that I was not a firsthand. My involvement was just at a leadership level in the
Okay.
kind of government, but there were a lot of people that were much more actively engaged. Anne was one of them, the woman I mentioned previously, and she was a go-getter, and I would be stunned if she hadn't coordinated closely with the library.
Okay. I wondered. I mean, I don't know what their role would have been either, other than just support.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe they had a money box and
Well,
people
they probably
could
put
donate
in a
that way.
good word. My sense of the situation is they probably put in a good word with student affairs, and somebody came in with a little bit of budget slice to help out.
So when you graduated, it still hadn't been done yet. The repairs hadn't occurred,
Mm-hmm.
and so the next guy who came in after you maybe picked up the
Probably finished
torch.
off the job. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that would have been. There were some energetic people that were really good that followed me.
Does the name Jay Jones sound
Yeah,
familiar?
that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, I
Jay
think
was
I think he
he
was the
was
final one that
go
finally got it over the hump.
he was a go getter, and he deserves all the credit for finishing the job. He's a rest in peace. He was a really remarkable young man.
I don't know anything. I've just read his name, so I don't know anything
He
more
uh,
about him than
he
that.
he had an early death, and but he was a great guy. And if you want to know more about Jay Jones, talk to a guy named Kent Sampson.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you knew Kent.
Kent will clue you in. What a great person! Oh, he is the genuine article, that man, and he did more for student life in the last decades than anybody I could possibly think of. The enhancement of both independent student, and now since his scope of his responsibilities increased, the Greek community as well, and the off-campus community. He has just done a lot for student life, and a wonderful man. He was one of the most influential persons that I encountered in my stay at Oklahoma State.
I understand he was good at trivia.
Yeah, he was great. He was better at he could have been a stand-up comic.
Oh.
Really, yeah, he is quick with a joke and quick with a smile, and I actually didn't test his trivia skills, but I would imagine he's got a bunch of them. He's a behavioral scientist. Most people don't realize that. That was his background, and it sure helped if you're dealing with a lot of young, headstrong folks like me.
I was thinking his trivia may be just campus related. Who knew a lot about.
Oh,
campus and would try to
yeah,
stump you on campus related things.
yeah. If you wanna know what's going on there and all the details behind it, take a campus tour with him.
Yeah. I think he's retired now, semi retired now.
Well, good for him. He earned it. I lost track of him after last time I spoke with him was at my retirement party. My wife had invited him over.
He's I've met him a time or two, and I was reading too in the '70s. OSU had a swim team. I mean, that was a new. We don't have one anymore, so I guess that went by the way of the.
May have there were during my time there, uh, the Cowboys had won the All Sports Trophy in the Big Eight more times than just about anybody else. Not in football and basketball, but in every other sport, tended to dominate. Baseball, golf, track. Oklahoma State was often
And
yeah,
wrestling, of course.
wrestling. Of course, that almost
Yeah,
goes without saying.
yeah, yeah. Any other names pop out? Who was the president when you were here?
First one was Dr. Robert Kamm, Kamm,
Okay.
and just a tremendous guy. He eventually ran for Senate, and I wish he'd won. He would have been a great senator for the state of Oklahoma.
Hmm.
And but a gentle and wise man. Very, I had a lot of respect for Dr. Kamm.
Did you have much interaction with him as president of the RHA?
He was kind enough to include people out of the student government in like barbecues and whatnot he would have uh, at his residence. And yeah, he was, he would, I didn't, it would be arrogant to say that I had his ear for anything in the way of decision making, but certainly on a social basis and staying in touch and staying tuned in, he would talk to us.
And then after him, did it switch while you
Larry
were here?
Bogert was the guy who I think succeeded him and ended up signing my diploma. So, but I didn't have any interaction with him.
So so you didn't go through commencement if you graduated in the summer? Didn't go do that?
No.
Well, I had mentioned before the concrete canoe race, and you said you didn't participate, but can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
from what you know?
the civil engineering department would every year have a concrete canoe race, and it was sort of a test. Of course, in civil, one of the main materials that you're going to work with is concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in order to both have something fun and technically challenging at the same time, the leadership of the department came up with this concrete canoe race. It had been around a long time by the time I got there, and teams would literally build. There were a certain volume of concrete you had to use and certain weight that you had to design this canoe to be able to float. And then they would stick them in Theta Pond and have a race. And I couldn't get involved because of my work obligations and what on weekends. It just seemed like too much of my discretionary time would be required to really do a proper job of being on one of those teams. But they really poured a lot of energy into it. And some of them were just very impressive. Some not so much, but they were able to get them out of the pond.
I was going to be thinking they'd be heavy and would just sink.
Well,
if you hadn't done your job correctly, I guess.
Yeah, that was part of the design to make sure you displaced enough water to offset the weight of the canoe and the people.
I was going to say, were they big enough for people to get in, or were they more like a toy type canoe?
No, they were big enough
size?
to man and paddle. You had to man and paddle it if you intended to win the race. So you wanted somebody that was both lean and strong, if you could get them to propel your canoe.
Well, Theta's not that big, so they didn't have to get it too far.
Thankfully, they didn't have to go too far.
So it was student competing against student at OSU? Were other schools involved, or just with
Not
OSU?
not that I recall while I was there. They may have opened it up at some point, but I don't recall having. It would have been kind of fun to beat the Sooners if they had participation.
That's always good, right?
Right. Anytime they can sink, that's something to cheer for in a boat.
In a boat. What was this? Was there still a bowling alley in the student union when you were here?
Let me think about that for a minute. No,
In the basement.
I don't
Okay, I
believe
didn't
so.
know when they took that out.
I don't believe there was. The student union needed a lot of help when I was there, and it got it because it's now quite a
Yeah,
quite
it's
a
not.
place. It was okay. We had our student government meetings there. RHA met there, and those meeting rooms are nice, but it had nowhere near the ambiance that it has now, nor the conveniences that are there. It's much more attractive when I came on campus last to gather at the student union. You could buy your books and whatnot there when I was at Oklahoma State. And they had little cubby holes for job interviews. I remember coming back and actually conducting job interviews for students when I was with Conoco, and you spend all day in probably not even about an 8-foot square room. I imagine they've improved on that since then.
And you didn't see any corduroy suits back then when you were at that point, huh?
If I did, I'd probably hired them on the spot because
There
I
you
know what
go.
was in behind it.
Well, and you mentioned a person that danced. Were they dances back when you were here? Did student bodies still have dances?
Absolutely. Well, not on campus. Typically, they would have them in various places. They meet. You went out to. Of course, they didn't have liquor by the drink back then, but people would go to like VFW halls in outlying areas, and wherever there was a band playing and dance there, not formally organized kind of campus dances and whatnot.
Okay.
Different sort of groups, Greek community, independent residence halls, and that sort of thing would have parties. Dorm floors would have parties. Kent would wash my mouth out with soap because I keep saying dorm. He didn't like that word, and he trained me to say residence hall. Uh, they would have, parties of all kinds out at the lake, and but no dances.
No dances. So that was a thing of the past too. Well, how about homecoming games? Would your date to football games have a mum?
No.
That already
Well,
passed too. Okay.
if they did, I didn't furnish one, but
Okay, fair enough.
no, they didn't. I remember that being a thing in high school. We
Okay.
did that at Northwest Classen, but not up at OSU.
Yeah, I wondered when that went out of favor. Probably in the '60s. Then,
Oh, well.
before our time. So when you graduated, you already knew what you were going to be doing. You already had your job set.
I had it secured following my summer at Conoco. They offered me a full time job right then, and I never looked back. Well, I say that I got my permanent offer. I was actually considering going to work for the health service, and Weyerhaeuser. Weyerhaeuser had a pulp and paper mill out in Woodward, Oklahoma. I was thinking about taking a job with them, but again, $400 a month. What are you going to say? Yeah, that was a lot of money back then, and it tipped the scales in Conoco's favor. But yeah, and Conoco had a management development program at that time that would move you along pretty quickly. It was a pretty stern program where you had 4 all-day oral exams your first year, and they could fire you at any one of them if you hadn't met their standards. And they weeded out about 40% of the people that started that program. And so now I'm through.
Well, did you meet your wife at OSU?
Nope, I did not.
She's on
I
OSU
thought I
alone.
did. No, I thought I did, but I didn't.
Okay.
And I met my wife when I was the district engineer for Conoco out in Salt Lake City.
Okay. And convinced her to move to Oklahoma, huh?
We got transferred actually to Houston 4 days after our honeymoon.
Ah. Okay.
And that was back in the day when, of course, I probably could have pushed back, but I wanted to progress. And so, when your boss calls you in on a Friday and says, right, your paycheck's in Houston, you just kind of said, aye, aye, and saluted, and off to Houston you went.
So it's still not too far from Oklahoma City. A long day's drive. Could still get home.
Yeah, it might as well have been on Mars, because I got very busy and wasn't able to come home very often. But
so where do you consider home?
Wherever my family is.
Okay.
When I retired, my oldest son and his family lived in Chicago, and my youngest and his were out in LA. And so my wife and I looked at one another and said, do you think they're ever coming back to Houston? And we said no. So we sold our house and bought smaller places in both locations. And we were kind of going back and forth for a time. Then number 2 son lost his job in a merger, and his whole department got wiped out. And he was in information technology. So he starts throwing out resumes and ends up back in Texas. And so we said, all right, we're going to sell this house in LA, and this is it. We'll follow them one more time because we want to be close to the grandkids. And so we moved back to a suburb of Austin, where we now live, and we sold our house in Chicago because it was driving us crazy to go back and forth. And the grandkids grew up, and we became less relevant to them.
Sad when that happens, but it's part of it, isn't it? So none of your kids went to OSU?
No, both my boys went to Baylor.
You can't fault them for that. That's a good.
No, you can't. It was a great school.
And Bears.
It's interesting though when ball games come on.
Yeah, lately for sure. So OSU has served you well.
Oh my goodness.
You personally well.
So grateful for the education, the support, the investment that was made in me at Oklahoma State. I'm forever grateful.
Well, and you worked your way through. I mean, being in residence hall, did that pay your dorm? Did that pay for your room? I shouldn't say
no. No. The government didn't. If you were a student assistant, you got paid, but I was not that. I was just in the government. I think I got maybe $500 a year for being president of RHA, something like that. But it was just kind of a nice. $500 was real money. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a paid salaried job. I had to punch data cards for a professor. But people nowadays probably don't even remember IBM 360s, but huge stacks of data cards that he had outside projects he was working on. I was working for him, so I had to punch his data cards for him. And then the cool part about that was because I was doing work for him, I got my projects. I could move to the front of the line in the Math Sciences building to run my data cards. And if I got an error, I could get back in front of the line and not have to wait for an hour to run my deck. So that was good. But yeah, I'm very grateful.
a favorite professor here? Did I ask you that already? Your
Yeah,
favorite professor?
no, you didn't. I would have to say Dr. Bill Dawkins. He was a great structures professor. Made it very interesting, very intriguing, and he was hard as nails. I worked for him, punching those data cards out. He was building, he was doing a really interesting project. He took two abandoned Navy submarine hulls and designed a semi-submersible oil rig out of it.
Hmm.
That you could use those ballast tanks to float the platform, and he did that project for Shell, and he was allowed obviously to do that, and actually encouraged by the department because he could be very innovative and out there on the front edge of real things that were going on in the industry. But he was good. He was, as I said, very challenging and tough, but he taught you well. So
Did you have to build models of things yourself for as part of your program?
yeah, I did. You got some insightful questions. That we had to design a balsa column, and there were specific maximum dimensions the thickness of that column could be. I can't remember what they were, but they were measured in 30 seconds. So it was pretty tiny. It was very thin, and you had to support it using tension with string, and it had to be able to support a 2-pound can of beans. Uh, and I can tell you that I procrastinated to the last minute to get down there to the student union and get a balsam column. And by the time I got there, they were all picked over, and mine was kind of gimped up. And I thought, this thing is going to crater. But I worked and worked and worked to get it going. And right when I put the can on it to test it, it broke. And I thought, oh no, this is death. And I had to have it ready for the following morning. It was a significant part of your grade to make it work. But I got a little Elmer's glue, put the column back together, prayed, and then that's all I could do because by that time it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had to take it back in there. Uh, and all these guys are putting they're testing them out one by one, and it got to me, and I was like, "Oh, please, Lord, let it hold." And he put that can on there, and it kind of wobbled a little bit, but it held. And he took it off, and I was like, "Whew, I made it." But yeah, we did that as a model. I can't remember if we did any others. That one stands out clearly, though.
I was saying, in the real world, Elmer's glue would not have been your, well, not something you'd go to and fixing a real one.
No, no. I'm glad that wasn't. I might have gotten disqualified had I used it, but or had he noticed that I used it. But he gave me a break if he noticed it.
Some good memories.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna flip through my list real quick, and if there's something we need to cover that I don't know to ask, you can go ahead and tell us.
Hmm.
1974, there was the Fiesta Bowl.
Yep.
I got that. And when you were your chapter in the American Society of Civil Engineers went to Keystone Dam to check that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a very intriguing outing, and one that they did things like that often. Another favored professor was Dr. Stewart, was the uh, man who taught geology for engineers, and he would take you on field trips to places to see firsthand, what kind of challenges you'd be up against as a civil engineer to get uh, foundations properly designed in various soil conditions and various rock uh, in various geological formations, because you had to be careful about things for dams like fault lines and slippage in rock formations. And he was really he made that fascinating. he had a way of, he'd come into the class and he would say things like, I've got a rock. And then he would describe its features and we had to guess what it was, or a mineral. I've got a mineral. And he would describe its features, and whoever, it was kind of a contest, whoever happened to name it first with the fewest clues kind of got an attaboy or attagirl. Yeah. That kind of thing he did to make it very interesting.
So a lot of what you learned at OSU, you weren't completely surprised by in the field. You had a good foundation.
Not at all. Really, what I think the primary, as I, if I were to just articulate what the nugget of gold that I got was from my degree, it would be learning how to learn.
Mm.
And I think that if you can come away from university with that, it will serve you very well for the rest of your life. And I did. It taught me how to learn. Where I had gaps, it taught me how to fill in those knowledge gaps.
Mm. That's a good note. I'm glad you said that. Well, I'm personally glad you led the charge at least to get the fountain fixed, so it's still really pretty today. And they started doing in 1999. They dye the water orange as part of homecoming.
Awesome.
So it looks really pretty when they do that, until someone tries to turn it red,
Oh,
and they have to go back and add a little bit more yellow to get it orange again. But
there you go. You can fix that.
you can fix it.
Always
Easier than they think. Yes.
yeah. Well, I want to be sure and tip my hat to Jay Jones, rest in peace, for seeing it to fruition, because that energy was obviously essential to
Sure.
make it happen. And every time I see that fountain, I do think about that. When you see the sporting events and what have you, where they show clips of the library and the fountain flowing, it does warm my heart a bit.
Yeah, they redid it again in 2005, I think. So it looks nice now. Since I've been here, my favorite thing, and I probably shouldn't say this on the tape, but following a big snowstorm, some students heaped it full and made it look like a sundae. They even added coloring for the syrup, but it's cool. And the bowl is still cracked, so I'm not sure how much longer it'll survive, but it is.
Wow.
It is.
They're going to have to someday go all the way and replace that, I should imagine. But as I recall, they grouted it.
Yeah, they've tried to repair it. It looks. I mean, it's kept obviously since 78-ish when they did that.
Long run.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in better shape than I am.
Me too. Well, before we close, I want, if you don't mind, can you tell us how COVID has impacted? Has it had any impact on what?
That's. I'm surprised you asked that, but it is a timely question. I have not contracted it. I got both vaccines from Pfizer and a booster, and I have a very high level of serum antibodies. I have no natural antibodies, the N antibodies. I was in a study, fortunately, with University of Texas, but my wife has autoimmune issues, and she got hit with COVID, and has now got. We're challenged with trying to figure out what is going on with her heart. And so we're in the process of seeing her. She has a kind of a scary diagnosis from her cardiologist, and we're going soon to a pulmonologist to get to the bottom of it, because we want to believe that it's not going to end up being as scary as the diagnosis would have us worry about. So as to our direct impact, that's what we have been quarantined. We had been very careful pretty much since the outset of the pandemic in our home. Very careful to get curbside groceries and that sort of thing. our work doesn't lend itself well to that because face-to-face contact is hugely important. So much of communication is nonverbal, and in our work where there's tension and there are wounds and things that you need to be sensitive to, it's very difficult in a Zencast or a Zoom to get that, and you just don't feel the same human connection, and so that's made it challenging. We have continued to do our work, but it's had severe limitations on account of not being able to be face to face.
Still wear a mask much if you go out?
No, not any longer. Depends on the circumstance of the situation. You wear it to get on an airplane and in an airport because that's what the law says. I'm almost at a point now where I wish I'd contracted so I could go ahead and get the natural antibodies now that I'm no longer worried about giving it to my wife. But we'll see. I'm tired of being in jail.
Yeah.
I thrive on human to human contact, and it's put a severe cramp on that.
Well, I can almost see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not quite there yet, right?
Got to be cautious.
Okay. Anything else you want to say before I ask my last question?
Not that I can think of. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I hope I haven't rambled on too much. I have a tendency to do that.
You've been great. And I usually end with, when history is written, what do you want it to say about you? How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be a person where the people on the front row of my funeral say, "You loved me well."
Okay.
You loved me well.
Okay. Well, then I appreciate you sharing your time with us. It has really been great. And thank you for getting the fountain going.
I'm just a part of it, but I'm glad it worked.
All
and
right.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. You're quite welcome.